This is the Lug Nuts Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the show. Sam and I were pleased to sit down with special guest Michael Doc Rosoff for today's show. He's a man who's had a long car history and plenty of interesting stories to go along with his automobiles. He definitely mentioned some cars that I had never heard of, and as you'll hear, he's owned so many Porsches, he doesn't even remember the exact number. We hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did.
All right. Do you want to, let me pull up our document with questions.
We're rolling. We're already rolling.
We're rolling.
We're rolling. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's introduce our guest.
This is my neighbor, Doc, we have with us today on the Lug Nuts Podcast. Doc, we're really pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you rolled up a couple months ago, I guess now.
Yeah, it was.
And
in the fall.
Recording, and we had to stop our recording because we heard a familiar engine sound outside, and you were in your
356A Porsche Outlaw Speedster.
Yeah,
58.
And at that point, I was like, we got to have him as a guest. So, thanks for coming down and taking the time to talk to us about your life in cars. You've had quite a journey, it seems, from just the conversations I've had with you out in the driveway. So,
I have had an array of cars. I probably can't remember 30% of what I've owned. And
well, take us back, Doc, to when you first realized that you were a car guy. Do you remember that first car when you were a kid that you were like, I'm a car guy?
I was in high school and probably late junior high school. And my neighbor in Cheviot Hills, which is outside of West Los Angeles,
okay.
He had a 1956 AC Bristol, the predecessor by years to the Cobra.
Okay.
Wow.
And I was blown away at the artwork on this aluminum-bodied, hand-formed British sports car.
Huh.
Wow.
And so that was high school. You were probably, 15, 16, around driver's license time?
I was 15 and a half, yes.
Yeah. So what was your first car then when you did start to drive?
My first car was a 49 Ford Banana Coupe. It was a hot rod with a 301 56 Oldsmobile engine in it.
Wow.
What was the transmission in that?
It was...
Three on the tree?
No, actually, it was one of the early 3-speed hearse conversions, 3 to the floor.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Set up in the front end, lake pipes, a drag car.
Well, no kidding.
I bet you had some fun adventures in that car.
I did. Between the drag strip and girls, it was too much.
Yeah, it sounds like
So this was California. What was the year that you had that?
That would have been 1961.
1961, California, car culture. I mean, you were in the midst of it. You were in the place where...
the Beach Boys sang about all the cars out there, right?
Yeah.
That's...
In fact, we were in the competitive high school with the Beach Boys. I went to a high school called Hamilton, and our big competitor was University High, where all the Beach Boys went to school.
No kidding.
Wow.
There you go.
Wow. You're obviously a big Porsche guy. I saw you at Cars and Coffee, and then I saw you when we met out here. Talk about how you went down that path. What led you to the Porsche mark? What was it about Porsche?
I started out with, because I couldn't afford that in the early days, and I was nowhere sophisticated enough to be a Porsche owner. And I started out with a 58 MGA Roadster.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I got that in my senior year in high school.
Okay.
And I had a cousin that lived in Long Beach that was a big SCCA track racer back in those days. And he had a 1956 Porsche Speedster. And my cousin's name was Ernest. And the first time I ever went for a ride in that car at Riverside Raceway, that was it. I went, man, this is what I have to have.
Yeah.
So he took you out on the SCCA course, the road course, or was it
at Riverside?
Okay, and
which
Riverside,
at that time was the most famous track in the West.
I was gonna say, wasn't that a big was it a NASCAR venue, or was it?
It was a sports car venue.
The IROC series was big,
and it always had been a sports car venue.
Okay. So that planted the seed for that. And then when did you pull the trigger on your first one, and what was it?
I was in my senior year, or just out of my senior year, I think, first year in college. And I had a friend that was a real entrepreneur, and he was probably 10 years older than me. So at that time, he was probably 32, 33. And he was bringing Porsches back from Florida.
Oh.
356s.
Okay. Was he like flying to Florida and driving them back, or was he just throwing them on a truck?
He had a place there. He was a surfer, so he spent a lot of time on the beach. They would find 4 or 5 cars, and then they would truck them back to California, to West Hollywood, the Valley, and Beverly Hills.
Okay.
And then he would clean them up, and I remember I was making money then by detailing all these cars for him, and he would let me use the cars that I detailed. And I had finally made enough money to buy a 63 Super 90 coupe that he had brought back, a white one with tan interior and a factory sunroof.
Wow, gorgeous. So I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah.
Why was it that Florida?
Yeah, why Florida?
Why Florida
Were
to
there-
California?
Was there
Yeah.
is there was there some money to be made there? Or what was the deal there with Florida?
Yes, Florida was one of those places that people that came from cold climates, had second homes there or retired there. They had these fabulous cars, and they'd drive them for a year or so, and then the winter would come and they wouldn't want the cars anymore. So they'd put them up for sale, and guys from California, Arizona, Nevada would come down there and pick these cars up like, I don't want to say dirt cheap, but super reasonable.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, my uncle's first Rolls Royce he bought from one of these guys in Miami Beach.
Really?
Yeah.
And then so they would either put it on a truck or drive them back or some combination.
Usually they'd put them on a truck unless they had 2 or 3 friends like myself at that time, and we'd caravan back. We'd spend 3 days.
Oh yeah, wow. And at the time, still 3 days, you're probably moving across the country.
We were, but at an enjoyable pace.
Yeah, right.
Wow. Well, that leads me to another question. Like, what's been your favorite road trip experience?
Wow. My favorite road trip experience is, I would probably say, has always been treks up and down the Northern California coast. That Highway 101 and the Coast Highway has got to be the most fabulous highway for a Porsche or any high-performance sports car in the western United States.
I made the mistake of driving that in my Toyota Tacoma, and the entire time I'd see all these rental Mustang convertibles. And while I'm not envious of a rental Mustang convertible, I was compared to what I was driving.
Yeah.
Because you just went around those sweepers and, it was not.
I did it in a motorcycle, and you spend more time on the sides of the tires than you do,
And I spent time on that same highway on Triumphs.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, so you're trying... well, that's a separate podcast, but...
Well, no, I want to hear a little bit about the motorcycles if he's gonna open that door.
That's
true. So tell us about
You've had
the
bikes too, then.
two-wheeled obsessions
Triumphs.
as well.
My passion for motorcycles was Triumphs. As finicky as they were, that British bike, it was like an early Austin Healey or Jaguar. They were a pain in the ass, but when they ran right, they were the coolest piece of machinery you could be sitting on.
So what'd you have, scramblers, or what was your bike?
Usually 650 Bonnevilles and Daytonas.
Bonnevilles, yeah.
I liked the touring bike and the road bikes. And then later on, I got into the cafe-style bikes when a friend of mine who spent the summer in Italy brought a Ducati back.
Oh, okay.
And that way changed me.
Yeah.
That was a Mulholland Turner.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, when I lived in Southern California, I didn't have the joy of owning the bike there, but I rode all over California when I was on the road, actually.
And back then,
some of the best motorcycle roads in the country.
Around, definitely.
Or maybe in the world, or in California, I think.
And then back then, the Ducati to own was, because they didn't have the Ducati monsters, these big, 600, 700, 900 cc bike, was actually the 250 Diablo. That was the cafe bike.
Was it a 2-stroke?
No.
No,
Was
it
it
was
a
4-stroke.
Wow.
Okay.
And we used to run those through Mulholland. And I don't want to say I was privileged. I was lucky to grow up with an interesting cadre of people. And one of them was Steve McQueen.
Really?
What?
And Yeah, and we used to run the canyon, both Mulholland and Topanga.
Yeah.
And if you were good enough to keep up with McQueen, leaving Sunset Boulevard from a place called the Hamburger Hamlet,
Okay.
you could
I think
ride.
it's still there.
I
Might
don't.
be.
The Hamlet's there, but it's not on Sunset anymore.
Oh, okay. All right.
And if you could keep up, you could ride. If you couldn't keep up, don't even try. You
Right.
could kill yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's ride your own ride is sort of the mantra in the motorcycle thing, which is always, for anyone listening who's thinking about that, that's a good mantra. It's a good thing to live by, and you'll stay alive, I think.
Yeah, don't try to.
Yeah. Don't ride your own ride.
Yeah.
And then, when you go back to that, McQueen in the early days was an avid Porsche Speedster racer. He was a big-time competitor at the SCCA track in Riverside.
Okay.
And the first championship that he ever won, he won in a 57 356 Speedster.
Okay.
And that car, I remember, it was triple black. And years and years later, after he sold it, and I think it was something like maybe 27 or 28 years ago, he started researching where the car went. And he tried to find it and buy it back. And he did. And he knew that it was his car because when he asked the guy to rip the carpet out from behind the seats, there were the roll bar bracings and marks that he had made to fit that roll cage in that car at that time. And his son Chad now still owns that car. He won't sell it. He's been offered over $2 million for that automobile.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, you mentioned Steve McQueen, which like my head's just still swimming from that. Who are some other cool car people? Before we started recording, you were talking about a famous person who bought a car from you. Who are some other car people that you've interacted with that you have fond memories of?
Or not so fond memories of,
Yeah, I mean, you could talk trash about somebody right now,
don't care.
too. Yeah.
James Coburn was another one. Pammy, his daughter, we all went to school with. And she went to Beverly Hills High School. And Coburn had some unbelievable cars. He had a 56 California Spider. That car...
Fiat or...
Ferrari.
Oh, okay. All right.
That car, I think it was 10 or 11 years ago now, went back to Maranello, to the factory restoration department, and then into the Maranello auction and set a world record at $11.75 million. And it's the same car that there's pictures of and the whole murals of him racing and running it at the Hard Rock Hotel in Las Vegas.
Okay.
Wow.
And then he also had a Daytona Spider.
Okay.
Silver one. And I remember that they all used to run around in West Hollywood and Topanga Canyon, in that area. Him and James Garner and McQueen. And Garner had a silver blue with a navy blue convertible top and navy blue interior Daytona Spider also.
Oh. No
Wow.
kidding.
Wow.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot to take in.
It is. Tell us about the car that you. Tell us a little bit of the story that you were telling us before we started with the famous actor you sold the car to. This is such a cool story.
That was, and I always get the two confused. My wife has to remind me. It was not Mark Harmon, but the other one who played in Star Wars.
Mark Hamill?
Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had a 63 Super 90 Cabriolet, triple black, and I took it over to Beverly Hills Porsche Audi, and a friend of mine, Jörg Dempelhoff, who has since passed, was the associate sales manager for them in 1978 and 79.
Okay.
And I said to Jörg, I want to sell this, or I want to trade it in on a 911S. So Jörg said, man, he goes, I got somebody that'll buy this car now. And I said, well, I want it to go to a Porsche enthusiast, and I want it to get a good home. He goes, this guy will give it a good home. And that's who it was.
Huh. No kidding.
And he had it for, probably 8 to 10 years, I guess. And we saw it up for sale, after that time, and I couldn't even afford to buy it back. And
Wow.
and it was well over, and you got to remember how long ago that was. Now this is nothing. It was well over $35,000. And when I traded that in,
Yeah.
16 grand almost, that was a big deal.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Did you get to meet Mark when he did it, or was it like the
I
whole
didn't, because they sold it to him. I knew who actually got the car.
Okay.
But I never met him.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's cool to know that it went to Mark Hamill. I mean,
Yeah, that's cool.
like-
So so that's back to your Porsche. Like, how many? You told me at one point how many total Porsches you've had. What was that number?
I've had somewhere between 14 and 17
Somewhere
Porsches.
between. So many you don't remember exactly how many Porsches you've had. I think most people don't have 14 cars in their whole life.
Well,
of
what
any
do
kind,
you currently have in the Stuttgart Mark? What do you have?
I have a Porsche 996 911 Cabriolet popped out to RS specs. And
Okay.
I have I just sold the Outlaw Speedster, and that went at Barrett Jackson. And then I just also sold a replica that had actually a ton of 912 parts in it, a
Okay.
356 A replica as well, 58 Speedster.
Wow.
And then I just sold a Boxster S, a 2002 that's my wife's.
Okay. And you did pretty well on that one, like when we were talking earlier.
I did.
Like,
Yeah.
And that was a
That's-
one-owner car here in Utah, and I couldn't believe it because I had consigned that to an exotic car dealer here that I do a lot of business with,
Okay.
RC Automotive,
Oh, okay, yeah.
Chris Carlisle.
Okay.
And he had 3 people lined up for that car because it was a one-owner car from Strong, and with every record documented since the day it was purchased.
Wow.
And it had
Wow.
82,000 miles on it, I think.
That's great. My dad has a 2007 Boxster S that I keep trying to get him to sell. It has 170 on the ticker.
Wow.
And I thought recently that he had blown the head gasket and it was the air oil separator.
And that's an easy and inexpensive fix.
Oh yeah, it was fixed, and now he's like, now I got to get it to 200. He's a farmer he grew up as a farmer, so he sees the utility in things. Like a car to him is not just something you look at and polish; it's something you get out and.
Well, you own a
enjoy,
nice Porsche 997.
I do, and I love it. And I recently had it for sale, and then polished it up, and I'm like, nope, I'm not selling it. It's that as Porsche people know, I have the end of the dreaded IMS potential catastrophe engine. I think it's overblown that those have the catastrophic failure they have, but I have that, and that's always in the back of my mind.
So you haven't done an IMS replacement.
I haven't done the replacement on it.
And they say when the car gets over 45 to 50,000 miles on it, if nothing's happened by then, usually it's not gonna.
Yeah, and that's what a buddy of mine at Porsche actually, when I was looking at it, he said, "Oh, it's got 53,000 on it when I bought it," and he said, "I think you're good," and knock on wood, let's hope that otherwise it's going to sit in a barn somewhere when if the engine does blow, because I don't have the means right now or the time to spend on it, But do you turn wrenches yourself? Like, did you do that at all? Like when
I was younger, I did.
Okay.
And those days for me are far gone. I have a neurological dysfunction now, so it's really hard for me.
Okay.
And a couple of years ago, I gave up racing because of that.
Oh, okay. When you raced, what was your?
It was SCCA.
Oh, okay. And did you race like your Porsches? Did you race what was that?
I raced MGAs. I raced 356 Porsches. I had a Morgan drophead that I raced. Which next to a Porsche is one of the best flat out running sports cars I could possibly ever wanted to own.
Yeah, you don't see them too often on this side of the country pond, whatever. They're just Morgan's is just. If I see one of those, I feel like I've seen a unicorn. You never run into them.
I had a Sunbeam Alpine that I raced. I
almost. There's one for sale right now here in Utah that I want to buy.
An Alpine.
Yeah, Alpine Sunbeam. Yeah.
Wow.
But it's like he's asking too much for it, I think. So. Anyway, yeah, those are amazing cars too.
What was the worst car you ever owned?
The worst
The car
I-
that you just were like, you were so happy
You're
when
just like,
you
fuck this, like, get it
you
out
just-
of my life.
Yeah, when you handed that over, you were like, good riddance.
The worst car that I ever owned, and now they're worth a fortune. I owned a 1958 Jaguar XK 150S, which was engine-wise, trans-wise suspension, the predecessor to the early E's.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that car was such a pain in the ass between electrical failures, brake failures, but it was such a beautiful, beautiful car.
Okay.
And when you got it on the road at like 100, 110 miles an hour, it was like being in a rocket sled. It just kept going. And when you hit that electric overdrive switch, it was...
Wow. Until the electrical system shorted out and
Yeah.
left you stranded on
It's
the
almost
side
like-
of the road,
Almost
right?
like there's a trend with the British motors there of shitty electrics and,
Yes.
dependabilities.
But what
yet when they do
gorgeous
work-
cars.
Yeah, and when
Yeah.
they do work, they're great. But
well, we
yeah.
often make that analogy that like Range Rovers are like these exotic, beautiful women, but then you get to know them and they're just crazy and they come with a ton of baggage, So I feel like Jaguars and a lot of, especially Jaguars and the more expensive stuff. I feel like when you get like a Sprite or an MG, you kind of it's more affordable.
Yeah.
They're pretty, but they're the more like practical gal.
Yeah.
Who has her own bag of issues as well. But,
Don't we all?
Exactly.
But you know what Enzo Ferrari said back in 1962?
What?
That the XKE might have been the most spectacular sports car ever built.
Really?
Yes.
Didn't he also say that something along the lines of aerodynamics are for people who can't make engines? I think that was a famous Enzo Ferrari quote. I believe
But that engine really was a spectacular engine.
Yeah.
When you had it running right and you know how to keep it going that way, there was nothing as beautiful as an XKE at 140 miles an hour.
But you were happy to get rid of it just because of the problems it had.
On the 150S, yes.
On the
My
way out.
XKEs, no.
Oh, so you own
those are
subsequent
cars-
XKEs too.
I had 4 XKs, I believe. Couple of 4.2s, a 3.8, and a V12.
Okay.
biggest regret that you sold, like the car that you wish you still had.
Wish you could get back. If you could pull one car back out of your history and like park it in your driveway.
This will blow you away. A 1973 Ferrari 246.
I'm gonna have to Google that one.
That's a Dino. And in the early days, they were calling it Fiat, but that's a Ferrari Dino.
Okay.
Both the GTS and the coupe.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
And I had a
pretty
coupe.
gorgeous.
And now you're looking at for
now I'm looking at pictures of
one
those.
that's unbelievable. You're looking at 360 grand.
Wow.
Yeah, that's probably tough to look at the market prices on those and knowing you've probably owned one, huh?
Yeah, there's a 72 in Fort Lauderdale for $369.
There you go. And is that a GTS or a GT? Does it
It's
say?
just a GT.
See, in the Spiders,
Yeah.
because it had the Targa top, they were much more amicable as having that car for what it felt like and what it looked like.
Wow. What is your take on, I mean, we've talked a lot about cars and obviously our passion for cars. What is your take on like where the automotive industry is heading with like crossovers? I mean, Ferrari is building an SUV.
Lamborghini has an SUV. Yeah.
I mean, what's your take on that, Doc? I mean, are you gonna what's your take? I mean, you've seen this
You've had-
this
yeah, you've had
evolution,
kind of-
man.
kind of
Like,
life in cars. So like,
Yeah, what's
are you
your take?
disappointed by that? Do you think it's like inevitable or?
It's inevitable, but it's an interesting trip. All of a sudden, the world has gone towards SUVs and hybrids, okay,
Right, right.
and quad track and 4-wheel drive and all-wheel drive cars. And I mean, look what's happened with Cadillac. There isn't going to be any other Cadillac but the 4 SUVs after this year. That's it.
Are they cutting
Yeah.
the CTS and the ATS or whatever? Is that?
and I've heard that they're moving to like an EV platform. On,
Yeah,
on a
yes.
lot
so
of
they're
their
going to be
stuff.
EV. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look at the new Porsche electric cars. I mean, do you know what the top selling Porsche in the world is now?
The Macan, maybe.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got it. It's the most affordable, the most maintainable, and you can do everything in the world with it, from climbing the Sahara to racing the ice caves of Iceland.
Yeah. It's a fantastic car.
I'm somewhat a little embarrassed to admit that if I had my choice of Porsches, that might be among the top. I also love the Panamera, though, which people love to hate on too. So anyway,
yeah. It's an interesting, we just talk about kind of the evolution and like whether it's driven by the car companies saying that you want this higher seating, all-wheel drive thing, or if it's the consumer. And I often think of like my wife who likes to be up a little bit higher. She had a great BMW station wagon with a manual transmission, really hard to find. I went to Portland to get it for her. And she loved that car, but at the same time, she didn't sit up that high, and she's kind of shorter gal, and now she has a car. She has a Subaru Crosstrek, which isn't a driver's car. It's reliable. It's kind of boring, but she sits up, and she likes that. So I mean, what's your take? Do you think that it's like the industry's pushing us towards it, or do you think it's because that's legitimately like what people want?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's legitimately because what people want, because the industry have taken them to that plateau and said, here, mindset, you need to step into that. The funny thing is, if I had to, I could live without a Porsche. I can't live without a truck. Yeah. For as long as I can remember, I have always owned a four-wheel drive truck. I've always been a horseman, okay?
Okay.
And right now, I have a twin-turbo EcoBoost King Ranch. It's the neatest truck in the world.
Yeah, those are cool.
When I'm not driving my Porsche, that's what I love to be in.
Yeah, that's what I see up and down. I see you probably driving that, just living on the street here more than any of the other vehicles.
And in the winter around here, you're not gonna.
I mean, what's your take on like fast forward like 10 years when that truck comes with an all electric option?
I'd never own an all-electric option truck. In fact, I don't think I'd ever own an all-electric option anything.
Really?
There's something missing.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to hear that engine. I've got to feel that transmission surge and drop. It's like you're being put in a cartoon, and while you're playing the cartoon, you're floating through space.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that a lot before, like the joy of like shifting a transmission, like it's a great feeling. And I mean, maybe not everybody agrees, but that's something that's just lost in an electric car altogether. There's no need for it.
And it's a bizarre feeling. We both work with a guy who has a Model S, and while you step on it and you're like, holy cow, you feel like you're like on a roller coaster, like at Disneyland or something. There's no sound other than what you hear around, on the outside.
Yeah, there's a Jetsons kind of feeling to it, but
it doesn't have that mechanical, kind of. I was proud of my son today. We pulled up next to an Audi R8, and I thought it was the last of like the ones with the gated shifters,
Mm-hmm.
And he like leaned over me and he's like, "Is it a manual?" I go, "No." He's like, "Pfft." And I was like, "That's my boy," because he gets it. I mean, and like I want him to have that same kind of passion. I think, we talk a lot about 96% of cars sold now are automatics
in the U.S. Anyway,
in the U.S. And people don't know how to row their own gears.
I know.
I mean, the one advantage is that it's a great theft protection because you stop at the gas station, shut your car off, and the thief tries to steal it, and they don't know how to drive it. You know, what's something, Doc, that like you saw as going to like become really big in the automotive world and it didn't like take off? Can you think of something that you were like, oh, that's going to be the next big thing, and it didn't?
God, that's a hard question. And when you say didn't, do you mean as an actual piece of machinery or a work of art or the beauty or a brand or any of it?
A brand, any of it really, like maybe like a technology that, you saw in a couple of cars and you thought this is going to be the standard for every car, or this design language is going to be what everybody's doing. And then it didn't happen.
There was one car, and then it didn't happen for a while, but now it's happening again. And that was the Acura NSX. And now it's back, and it is back sevenfold.
Yeah. And that's a cool car. And you mentioned hybrids earlier. That's a hybrid.
Yep. Yeah, the new one's a hybrid. Yeah.
What's your take on like the hybridization of like sports cars? I mean, are you on board with that?
I am actually, and there would have been a time, like you were just now saying, being purists, which to a degree I think we all are, where you could never get me out of a stick shift Porsche.
Yeah.
Well, it took a couple of years after Porsche came out with PDK, and baby, I'm sold on it. It is so lightning quick,
Yeah.
and it once you learn to really work it, and that's what the Formula One premise is based on.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Do you? I just had a brain freeze. I was thinking about the PDK. Got kind of excited about the PDK.
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly, in motorsport though, I just learned that I think it was Toyota ran they ran a hybrid in the 24 Hours of Le Mans recently. Le Mans. Pardon my French, literally. And they in the last lap they went out of the race for some reason. They were about to win it in a hybrid, and they lost because of a reason totally unrelated. So I think that's one of those things that's the hybrid's it's coming. The technology's there. The race technology is probably what's going to push it forward.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, Formula One has always kind of done that to a
they
degree.
lead that
They kind of lead the technology.
The technology that they have.
Yeah, and eventually it trickles down.
And I mean, you look at the IMSA cars, International Motorsports Racing Association, and who would have thought 5 years ago that the leading car in that would have been a Cadillac, and now nothing can beat those Cadillac IMSA cars.
I'm not familiar with that racing.
Oh,
Wow.
God, they're unbelievable. They're Porsche killers. They're Ferrari killers. And the only thing that can keep up with them and really push them is what you were talking about, are those Toyotas.
Oh.
And they look so much alike.
Wow. What's your take on speaking of race cars and the whole Dieselgate? What's your take on that? I mean, being a Porsche guy, I'm sure you've maybe owned a couple of V-dubs. There's that relationship. What's your take on that? Do you think that they're doing right by themselves and that they got off too easy? What's your take on it?
That's a hard thing to say. In Europe, it's a whole other story, and it's because of the economics of fuel. That's why everybody in Europe is going to diesel.
Yeah.
And,
definitely.
as we have these same problems here, I mean, look at us here in Utah, where gas prices have gone to in the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of
unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see diesel hybrids coming out of Europe and Japan. More so than you ever have. There's so many diesels here that we don't see because at one point you couldn't get them into the country. But now that the rules have changed, some of these diesel cars, hybrid cars coming in from Japan that we never saw here before are remarkable.
Yeah.
Absolutely remarkable.
Nice.
And if I'm correct, and I might not be, I think one of the first diesel high-performance race cars were the Audis, the IMSA Audis.
Oh. Okay.
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, they were. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had this. I was out at Miller Motorsports Park. That's what it was called back then, and listening to those go down the track, they had such a unique sound.
They did.
I mean, you'd hear the Corvettes with the straight exhaust, which just pierced your eardrums, and then you'd hear those things, and they had such a wild sound to them. Speaking of racing and Corvettes, are you excited about the C8 coming out with the mid-engine, or are you sort of meh?
Have you owned a Corvette? Let's
have you
start
owned a
there,
Corvette?
Since you've owned everything else under the sun.
I've had 3 or 4 vets. I had.
What haven't you owned? Maybe that's a shorter list. Maybe
I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that I haven't owned, but I had a 58 and a 59, not new, but later on, my later year in high school and early college, and then I had a 1967 Stingray.
Oh yeah,
and a 60.
the 2-window. Wasn't there a thing with the windows? And
68.
That was a split back, and that was
split back,
63.
And
Okay.
they only made it that
1 year.
So that's why those are so sought
Right.
after, right?
And then I had a 1972 Stingray, a big block. And then the last Corvette I owned was a 1986 in the new gen body Corvettes. And from after that, I just sort of blew it off. It didn't really interest me anymore. But this car could really take everybody, by the scrotum.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it really could be
as
pretty
far
bananas.
as males go.
Yeah. Well,
And-
Zach and I were talking. There is a glut of C7s sitting on dealer lots because these Corvette enthusiasts are just waiting.
And that's the same thing that happened with the Stingrays in '68. People started saying, we're not going to buy a '67. The new Mako Shark body's coming out in '68.
Wow.
But the difference is they still were using that platform and engine, where this is going to be entirely different. You've basically got a tubular type style body racing frame with a European Ferrari approach as to a mid-engine.
Yeah.
And for $125,000 less. As I heard it, they're going to start at like 65.3 something. And that's for a basic one.
Yeah.
And the basic is 400 horsepower.
I had nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
Nothing to sneeze at.
And they'll go up, to 185 to 190,000
with the ZR1.
for that, and the 427 supercars that will actually, approach the Nuremberg Ferrari level.
Wow.
And you're looking at, from the factory at that level, 750 to 820 horsepower.
Yeah.
I mean,
probably get up and go a little bit.
Yeah. A little bit of get up and go.
Yeah. So you sold a couple. You mentioned some cars that you'd sold recently, right? And when I talked to you the other day in the driveway, you said, "Well, this is the next thing I'm going to get," and then you said, "And then I'm done." Were your words? So I'm quoting you. You said you were done. What do you think you were serious? If you're knowing yourself, and what's on the horizon for you? What's your next vehicle? What do you think?
Well, the car was, when I told you that, the car that I was thinking of is a while back I had an Aston Martin, and I bought it strictly to sell.
Okay.
About a year ago, I think, and that was a DB8, and it was a semi-wide body, the coupe, and I got to tell you, that is an unbelievable car with a paddle shifter, and I wouldn't mind ending up with, as a last car again, a wide body Aston Martin Vantage.
Okay.
And they're a spectacular touring car, road car, race style car, comfortable
kind of a GT car, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I just
like
pulled
kind
up,
of the ultimate
I pulled
GT
up the
car.
image. That is such a gorgeous. I mean, just the rear end of that thing. You could just sit in a lawn chair,
Right.
with a glass of wine.
And my wife won't have another stick shift. She said, if you don't get a paddle shifter, she goes, don't bother to ask me to drive it. And I can agree with that. I mean, they're just so quick. And, now in modern day racing on all the racetracks, everybody is paddle shifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
it's all gone that direction. Yeah.
But if I could end up with the last car, like we were talking earlier, it would still be, and price was no object, but it is an object for me in my retirement years.
Uh-huh.
It would be a 67 or 68 XK Roadster.
Really? That's what you go back
if
to?
I was going to spend over $100,000 on a car,
Wow.
that would be it.
Wow.
Definitely.
Well, Doc, we really appreciate you sitting down with us, and wow, like the stories, my head's swimming. Like, it's going to be so fun to go back and edit this and just listen to all the cool stuff that came out of it. So
Yeah, for sure.
this is gonna boost the podcast into the thousands, and we're gonna be rolling in our own Aston Martin Vantage.
Oh, yeah.
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 We're getting matching colors.
Sponsorships from Aston Martin?
Sounds like a plan.
Probably not. But hey, we can dream.
One can dream. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, all right.
Awesome.
And thank you for listening, folks. If you'd like to send us some hate mail, you can do so at lugnutspodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address. And you can also find us, as usual, on the social medias. We are at lugnutspodcast on both Twitter and on Instagram. Again, thanks, and we'll see you back here next show.